Summary. 2 months later, apparently just before Midoriya's birthday, Tomura begins calling the boy Izuku. Some days, when Kurogiri passes his room in the dead silence of night, he can hear him laughing. The muffled, carefully dampened sound, engineered not to carry, breaks his heart. The laugh is not one of a carefree 16-year-old, but of a terrified child so unused to joy. Kurogiri's heart breaks often and sharply, and he never does get so used to it. Chapter 1. Taller each day. Kurogiri, for nearly as long as he can clearly remember, has been caring for Shigaraki Tomura. His existence boils down to the boy, transporting all for one, little pleasures in life, and the two halves of himself at war. Sometimes, when his head doesn't feel as much like it's splitting in two, he ponders whether all for one knows the consequences of such a bond. He thinks that the man, in his innumerable years of living, may have forgotten what so long caring for someone so wholeheartedly is like. For Kurogiri, watching over the boy becomes more than his obligation, even after the first year, when Tomura is still so small and terrified of his own hands and still unchanged by all for one. More than once, he wishes those 3 years had inspired in him the same loyalty he holds to the boy now, instead of the stifling devotion to all for one that he had overpowered it for so long. If they had, Kurogiri thinks Tomura wouldn't know anger and fear as such close friends, wouldn't stare at blank screens with hollowed eyes and shaking hands. He thinks Tomura might have been okay, might have seen the world without the blood-red lens that had been forced upon him. It doesn't take too long to recognize that raising Tomura feels like being trapped between the barriers of a traditional tragedy, his own failings to be something he wasn't stitched into, and all for one's twisted words dragging the boy who may as well be Kurogiri's son down and down and down into his downfall. There isn't a thing in the world he'd trade for the joy of watching Tomura grow, though. Kurogiri is pretty sure he isn't supposed to feel joy, or anything else aside from devotion and loyalty. It's just one more secret he will eventually take to his grave. Same as he keeps the thoughts that leave him blurry and confused and cracked in two. All the ones he doesn't want erased. A secret. Tomura grows, and Kurogiri knows as an irrefutable truth that he will one day have to watch the boy die. Something small and cracked in his heart knows that it will be at all for one's hands. For all his strength, and for 12 long years, he is powerless to change any of this. They are both too bound to all for one, Tomura too blinded to his sensei for anything else. Then, when Tomura is 16, the world begins to shift beneath them at a snail's pace. Tomura tells him about Midoriya a week after they begin playing together online. Kurogiri can admit to not fully understanding the boy's interest in the games, but it is another secret from all for one that is suspended between them, and it's good for him to have interests outside of what is forced upon him. It gives him hope that maybe one day Tomura will be able to be his own person. 2 months later, apparently just before Midoriya's birthday, Tomura begins to call the boy Izuku. Some days, when Kurogiri passes his room in the dead silence of the night, he can hear him laughing. The muffled, carefully dampened sound, engineered not to carry, breaks his heart. The laugh is not one of a carefree 16-year-old, but of a terrified child so unused to joy. Kurogiri's heart breaks often and sharply, and he never does get used to it. The day after he hears it, they go out for lunch, because Kurogiri can't speak freely in the bar, can't risk the consequences. He is too scared of what may happen to him or Tomura. Not for the first time, he realizes that he would do anything for the boy. They eat and talk quietly, and for a while it feels like being normal. Then, after they've paid for their food, but before they actually leave, Kurogiri finally broaches the subject he's been working up to for the whole afternoon. "I think it'd be best if you avoided talking about Midoriya outside of your room, Tomura," he says. He knows that all for one is twisted anger into Tomura's being like spears pierced through his chest. He's watched the sweet, scared boy fall away into one whose fear triggered hatred. He also knows that it is not too late. Tomura is still barely more than a child, young and wanting so desperately for the world to make sense, to be safe. So the sudden and sharp fury in his eyes, as though he's been betrayed, is not surprising. Nor is the ease with which Tomura caught on that he's hinting to not divulge the information about his friend to all for one. Nothing that isn't expertly hidden slips by the 16-year-old unless he wants it to. "I don't need to keep anything from Sensei," Tomura growls, and below his hand a napkin turns to dust, along with a tiny portion of the table. 5 grooves etched where his fingers had dipped down. Kurogiri has had the time and cause to become excellent at twisting his words. It comes in handy, as it always does. He tilts his head and leans back slightly, watches Tomura with concerned eyes that he could never fake. Keeping your actions with Midoriya from Sensei isn't betraying him, Tomura. You are allowed to live outside of your role as his successor. You are more than his pawn. There is a tenseness over Tomura's shoulders, like he is still unsure, teetering between his choices. His downturned face twists with that same anger, then floods with confusion and fear and wariness. Something clicks and he looks up at Kurogiri, eyes flicking nervously around the restaurant, as though looking for someone who may be watching before he nods, just barely. You won't tell him I'm keeping a secret? Tomura asks, focusing back on the grooves he left on the table. The question feels like the downward swing of a pickaxe, and the stone, Kurogiri's ties to All for One. Years wear on. They are the same in All for One's careful manipulation of Tomura, and different in how Midoriya's existence seems to undo the looser stitches. So little changes, but Tomura seems to flourish with the companionship, even though there are still bad days. The first thread of blind faith is cut when they attack the OSJ. A boy stumbles from the lake, eyes unfocused, and so many more things at once as his classmates try to stop him, and he stares at them. His terror, his mourning and loss and devastation feels like something tangible on the air. Tomura hasn't seen the boy yet, too distracted by his nails at his neck and looming failure. Realization, slow and terrible, drips through Kurogiri right before Tomura turns. The boy makes a choked noise, like there are too many words on his tongue for any to escape. Then a whispered, "Tomura?" and the sheer snap closed. The name Izuku, for 3 long years, has been something like hope for Kurogiri. The boy has green hair and green eyes and is Tomura's only friend. Things change. More than before, Kurogiri can see reticence in Tomura's interactions with All for One, his questioning and confusion. There is doubt for the first time. Some days, Tomura returns from All for One, missing pieces of his memories, but the doubt does not go with them. When Tomura asks him to watch the sports festival with him, Kurogiri can't say no. So they sit in Tomura's room and watch on his computer as Midoriya Izuku blows through the events with a determination that awes Kurogiri. It reminds him of someone he can't remember. When Tomura is focused on the screen, Kurogiri can feel his form lose definition, shatter and pool like something broken. The voices of Present Mike and Eraserhead feel like knives against the fragile halves of himself. It feels like he's falling apart over and over again. All for One doesn't allow for any more of what he claims is Tomura stalling after the sports festival. He tells him to meet with the hero killer. Beneath the murderer's jagged blades, the second string snaps, and Kurogiri can't do anything else to ease the pain that comes with it. Immobilized by Stain's quirk and watched so pressingly by All for One, he can only watch as beneath the bloodstained indifference of his ward, pain and desperation and betrayal clash. When Stain leaves, Kurogiri scrubs Tomura's blood out of the bar's flooring. There is so much of it, and the part of Kurogiri that feels too human feels sick by the red against the floor. That same sliver fills him with the need to see Tomura as soon as he finishes cleaning. He finds him curled in his bed, one hand clutching where Kurogiri had stitched and bandaged his wound. There are drops of blood across the floor, like he'd paced until the wound had hurt too much to continue. There are tears on his pillow. Kurogiri sits on the bed beside Tomura's hip and tries to think of how to help. He wishes he could make the pain stop, like he did when Tomura was 5, and would scrape his elbows and the pain could be thwarted by a band-aid and theatrics. Red eyes stare at him, hazy and exhausted in a way that makes it clear he's more asleep than awake, and Tomura whispers like a secret, "Do you think we deserve to be saved?" Kurogiri wishes his heart was strong enough not to shatter. Tomura's eyes close before he can answer. All for One whisks the boy away the next day, and he returns hollowed out and angry. As much as it hurts, Kurogiri is not surprised. Over the next few days, Tomura balances out, becomes less of a puppet and more of himself, but it takes longer than usual. They are sent to Hosu to wreak havoc, with a few weaker Nomu, and Tomura seems terrified of failing. The chaos dwindles as the Nomus die, until only one is left, flying to them clumsily. In its claws is a small body, green hair, and a hero suit. Midoriya Izuku is dropped carelessly onto the water tower, bleeding and limp. Tomura's hand falls and decays the winged Nomu without hesitation, a snarl on his face, red eyes blazing. The dust is easy to warp away. There is so much blood, though, spread across Midoriya's thigh and leaking from his torso, and before Kurogiri can move to help, Tomura is there, hands shaking. His pinkies are tucked in so he won't accidentally decay anything, and he looks lost. Midoriya is calm and composed, and Kurogiri feels a little useless. He watches as the last of Tomura's unwavering devotion to All for One is cut away with only slow words and gentle hands. They don't go back to the bar after Midoriya disappears in a halo of green, the colour of hope. Instead, they hide away in a house that Kurogiri knows the coordinates for, but can't remember where he learned them. For a long time, Tomura sits in the living room and stares at his friend's blood in his hands until the first tear falls. It turns pink where it lays in his palms. Then, the 19-year-old starts sobbing. He leaves red handprints on his face where he tries to hold himself together, and his hands grow damp and the blood is left behind. Kurogiri can only offer him small comforts until he falls asleep, curled into a pained ball, 2 thin limbs wrapped around himself. It is cold in the house, though, and Kurogiri can't quite feel things like that, so Tomura wakes back up shivering. He doesn't speak as he leaves for one of the rooms to find warmth. Kurogiri wishes he was still human enough to help. Wishes he were human enough to save the boy that is, but isn't his son. Wishes he could have done this such a long time ago,